how could you have not told me the very important information
that you fucked up?
Until this very moment.
Because I thought you did it maybe on purpose.
Why would I do that on purpose?
I don't know.
Well, it's very hurtful.
Well, stop.
I feel very let down right now. I think we're going to have a whole, like, relationship, friendship, reevaluation.
Should we have a therapy session right now?
Like a couples session based on this fact that you just drop, like, 2 seconds before we start recording, which now I'm just going to record this conversation. So basically, I edit the podcast.
And you do such a phenomenal job.
Thank you. And I've started on season 2, like clipping, like taking a clip out of the middle of the conversation and putting in the beginning. I just think it's so fun and witty.
It's so fun.
It's so
like,
fun.
Usually, like in our conversations, it's generally like a really ridiculously funny one.
Yes, because we are ridiculous and funny.
Yeah.
And can we call ourselves funny? Or
I don't know. I think so. I mean, according to all the feedback we've received.
Apparently we are funny, so it's okay to call ourselves.
Completely ridiculous.
It's okay to call ourselves funny.
But we also identify that, like, we utilize humor to, relieve the tension of, like, the heavy shit that we're talking about.
Talking about white supremacy.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Anyway, so apparently I clipped it, but I accidentally removed it from the middle of the conversation and put it at the beginning. So there was, like, this awkward pause in the middle of the goddamn podcast episode.
Where it should have been.
Oh, my God, Lindsey Rae. I feel so embarrassed.
Don't feel
mortified.
I'm sure no one else probably even realized. But I did, because obviously I was part of the conversation.
Well, I realized, I mean, I don't
You
listen
didn't listen
to it
back fully.
No.
Well, obviously.
I just don't have the time and capacity to make that happen.
You, like, listen.
And I'm, like, on the go.
And then you,
Got to go.
edit.
Yeah.
And then you boom.
Well, for all of you
now
listening.
I know. I'll tell you.
Thank you.
I didn't know.
Okay, well, now everybody knows. If you catch a fuck up on my episode, the gift that you could give me is to let me know.
Like, immediately.
Like,
not
immediately.
Like 3-4 weeks later.
Yeah, not after the episode's gotten, like, thousands of downloads.
Oh my gosh, thousands?
Thousands.
Why are so many people listening to us?
I have no idea.
Huh?
I don't get it.
Oh, Lord.
Yet here we are.
Everyone run.
2 white people talking about white supremacy in a closet. Hey everyone, I'm Thais Sky. Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women by women on conversations that matter. It's been a hot minute.
It's been so long.
It's been like a month.
Forever,
Yeah, that we've sat in Lindsey's closet and talked about white privilege. There's been a lot going on in both of our lives.
Yeah.
You want to catch everybody up on what's been going on in the life of Lindsey Rae?
You know me, everyone. I just continue to stumble through life as gracefully as I possibly can.
Navigating grad school, navigating a business.
Yeah.
No small feat.
And then just like personal life and all the drama and like ups and downs that comes with everyone's intimate life, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to be here. And
Me too.
This is an episode that we've known for a while that we were going to record.
Yeah.
Because we learned about this in our grad school program. And I don't remember whose idea was, or maybe it was a simultaneous idea. We'll just say that. We're just on the same wavelength.
Usually the brilliant ideas come from me.
Obviously.
Usually I'm like, oh my God, Thais. And then you're like, and I don't think anything of it. Like literally nothing. And then Thais is like, oh my God, that's the most amazing thing. And I'm like, what? Huh? It
Lindsey,
literally just happened.
You are so unassuming about your wisdom. It drives me fucking crazy.
I know it does. And I'm like, what? Huh?
Oh my God. So, Lindsey, no, I'm gonna put this out now.
What?
We're gonna put this out now. So
No.
yes.
No.
Yes. We're gonna do a small feature of this brilliance. And then people will have to like follow you and wait for more of this
So
to come
much
from.
pressure. This is why I don't do it.
Oh, the pressure. The pressure. So Lindsey and I were talking about this beautiful chapter in a book that we're reading for grad school. It's called On Making of a Caretaker, and it talks about the shadows of being a caretaker in the therapist profession is the word.
I guess you could call it industry.
Yeah, and so and then Lindsey dropped this bomb on me.
Well, as probably many of you know from listening to this, I struggle and have struggled my entire life with severe codependence because I am an adult child of an alcoholic father and stepfather. So I've always been working very hard on releasing and recovering from my own codependency. And so very early on in my therapeutic journey, I want to say it's probably within the first 2 years of it, my first therapist, Nancy, and I, worked hard on it. And I came up with this concept in my head, and I can't imagine that I am the only one.
I'm sure you're not, but yet you've said it right now, and it was so brilliant that we're just going to go with it.
I'm trying to own it, but so for me, what I had to do in my mind is I had to come up with an idea that helped me identify when I was slipping into my codependency and when it was toxic, because I'm a natural nurturer and therefore I am naturally caring and I like to care for others. There's a shadow side of that, and it's with all of us, and we all have these tendencies. So what I had to do is I had to start recognizing, and I labeled when I was being a caregiver was when I was in the light side of my caring, nurturing quality. And when I was being a caretaker, I was in my shadow side of my,
So good.
So when you are giving, you are really, giving in because from a very innocent, beautiful, loving place. But when you are taking, you are acting from your wounded space.
So you're quote unquote caregiving, but really what you're doing is you're insidiously trying to take.
Yes.
You're trying to get something from the situation. And then we see this a lot in scenarios where somebody will say, I give presents to all of my friends. I give them everything.
And it just bothers me so much that they don't even appreciate it, and they never give back.
And they never give back.
That's
not giving. That's
not
taking.
Giving. Yeah, because you're doing it for a very specific reason.
Yes.
And so it's hard, especially for someone who is very I am super nurturing and I'm very kind-hearted.
And we don't want to ever take that away, right? That's the thing. It's there's a light and there's a shadow in all of our different personality traits. And so it would be of detriment to ever say to somebody like Lindsey, you need to be more selfish or you need to stop thinking about other people. But rather invite in more nuance of asking that individual, okay, well, let's look at the ways that you've been giving from a genuine grounded place of loving people, which is totally amazing, and where you've been quote unquote giving, but really it's taking from a place of needing to have your needs met. Yeah,
because when you are severely codependent and you're waking up to that, just as you're waking up to anything, we're navigating waking up to our whiteness, it's really hard and jarring. And what happens is you have to recognize that you are tapping into the quality of caretaking in order to manipulate the situation and try to get the other person to change their probably toxic behavior of addiction or whatever. And if it's not done with some gentleness, it can feel like an attack on your full character, which is it's hard, you know, and that's why so many of us don't ultimately change. I think. So I think the gift of having a very gentle therapist that would help guide me to coming to these realizations on my own in a gentle way, so that I didn't feel like it was like I was a bad person.
Yeah. So this leads perfectly into something I just read in another one of our books for grad school.
Our books are so good.
So good. On narcissism. And it defined narcissism in a very different way than I've ever read it before. So if you have ideas, you listening, have ideas of what narcissism means or doesn't mean, I just want you to erase it for just a moment and consider this definition. So narcissism comes from children who had to emotionally regulate themselves by emotionally regulating their parents. So they were not getting their needs met from their parents. And so they had to be constantly vigilant on their parents and monitor their parents and try to regulate and support and take care of their parents in order for them to get their needs met. So as they grow up, they basically develop two sides. They have the part of them that is abandoned and filled with shame about being abandoned. That's brilliant, right? Because they didn't get their needs met. So that's a brilliant and important understanding of narcissism. But they also have another side of them, which is a superiority in being able to manipulate the emotions of others. Because they had to do it when they were little, just like you had, we were talking about codependent. So it's like there's a part of you that feels superior, that feels bigger than you really are because you're able to regulate and change and affect those around you. But that came from a deep need to meet your parents' unconscious. The book said this beautiful quote. It said, a child's first reality is with their parents' unconscious.
Oh, yeah.
That's our first reality.
Absolutely.
That's our first reality, is with our parents' shadows.
Yeah, wow.
So we internalize all of that.
We're fucked from the get-go, everyone.
From the get-go.
AKA, this is what this means. Fucked from the very beginning.
Anyway, we can go on and on and on about this.
No, but I think it's interesting because I was just having a huge conversation with somebody yesterday about narcissism. And I think that
this is a huge topic.
It is.
And we want to be gentle in navigating it.
Well, I think what we have to understand is that all people have narcissistic traits.
And tendencies.
Yes. We all do, right? We all embody these archetypes, all of them.
And depending on your school of thought of therapy, there's different definitions.
Right.
A lot of people, when they're talking about narcissism, will say that all children are narcissistic.
Right.
That's
like a healthy narcissism,
no, it's
right?
a healthy, because children are always self-involved. They're always thinking about themselves.
Because they have to be.
Because right. So like, we just want to make sure that you understand as a listener that there's different schools of thought on what narcissism is or is not. There is a DSM-5 that tells of a strict definition of narcissism as a diagnosis.
That's the biggest point that I wanted to point out. As a diagnosis.
Yeah.
When you are diagnosed with a narcissistic personality disorder, that is something far greater than any
tendency, trait.
Yeah, and any like well and good how to spot a narcissist article.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at,
Because personality disorders are something that we have to be very conscientious about diagnosing and sitting with, because they're pretty heavy.
And they can destroy someone's life.
Yes.
They really can.
So this is not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're using narcissism in a way dialed back manner as a way to define the tendencies and the traits of the person to make their lives be about them.
Yeah. And just like codependency, narcissism and narcissistic traits can be they develop as coping skills.
Yes.
Right? So,
and this perfectly leads into white supremacy,
I think
honestly,
so. Yeah.
because so many white people are narcissistic in the sense that they think that the whole world should revolve around them because they are white. And that's an unconscious thought. And I can see it. It's because of a deep shame of our whiteness and the power dynamic that we did not, that we inherited, but we do not have the right to claim. So there's a lot of shame there filled. And then coupled with a false superiority that we can affect change in our society without even having to think about people who are marginalized, like people of color. Like, talk about a superiority complex.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
We get to feel really good about ourselves, that we get to develop all these laws, all these things that are going to be of use to us, but we don't even have to think about people who aren't white.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think I saw something yesterday on Instagram. It was probably from Desiree Adaway because she's
the most brilliant.
Darn it, and it's totally gone already. Darn it. But it was a really great. She had just posted somebody else's like Twitter or something, and it was something about like the stats of like our political bodies and the percentage of them that were like white men versus the percentage of like white men in like our actual population.
Oh.
And it was so jarring to see. And then like the person said, like, you know, isn't it about time that our political bodies actually match our population? And I'm like,
yes. Yes. I mean, but come on, like, I come from a country where, like, whites are the blatant minority. Like, they're, I think, like, 49%. So, like, pretty obvious that white people are a minority. And the percentage are even a little bit skewed because there's a lot of people who claim white and are, quote unquote, technically white because they want to be white, right?
Right. Yeah.
And yet the majority, like 99% of the people in government are white. You know, it's just, it's a sad state of affairs. So what we're going to talk about today is the acculturation model.
The acculturation model.
Now, the acculturation model was not designed by Thais and Lindsey Rae, as much as we would love to claim credit on this brilliant piece of work. It's based out of an article.
That was a sign reading.
It was a sign reading by a guy named, oh, Jesus, fuck. Like, what is his name?
Isaac
Preleltensky.
Oh, that's an R.
That's a Preleltensky.
But you forgot the N.
Oh.
Preleltensky. Oh, wow, yeah.
So I'm going to...
Grad students, people. Grad students. Here we are.
So I'm going to upload this article to the show notes for you all to read. But the article is called Values, Assumption, and Practices, Assessing the Moral Implications of Psychological Discourse and Action. And I actually am not sure that he was even the creator of...
the actual
acculturation model. But what he did was he used...
No, a guy named Barry was.
There we go. It's Barry, people.
Yeah, but I didn't write his last name down. These are just my notes. I just wrote Barry's model of acculturation.
So he created a model for how we can start to see the phases, the ways in which people adapt from an old culture to a new culture. And this guy, this Isaac guy, used the model to teach grad students in psychotherapy how to move from their old culture, which is just everybody, to the new culture of psychotherapy and psychology.
Yeah, psychological
the community
frameworks.
And the profession of psychology. And so as Lindsey and I were reading this article, we were like, holy fuck, this can so be applied to going from an old culture of being ignorant and racist and unaware of our views, upholding white supremacy, like everybody, typical white person, to moving into the new culture, which is a social justice oriented lens.
Yeah. And one thing that we were like really talking about when we were going through this the first time, and I even have like a little note because we were talking about it in between classes, was like, oh, we should know the values of the culture that we're moving into. So we then started Googling like, oh, can we find like the values of the social justice movement, which we haven't been able to find. So if you know for sure, please let us know.
Well,
however, we've found that social justice in and of itself is a value.
Yes.
So that's an interesting...
There's a lot of books out there. I mean, there's a whole book by David Miller called Principles of Social Justice. I have no idea who he is. I don't vouch for him. If you search for social justice principles, there's a lot out there. But no one organization.
Also,
no
is David
one
Miller
book,
white?
Yeah,
we should
probably.
Look that.
Probably.
We're just Googling. We have like Thais' computer right here.
Actually, we can look it up right now. David Miller. Oh, no, that's a South African cricketer.
Oh, wow.
He's pretty cute. Okay, that's not, okay. There's a lot of David Millers.
Do David Miller and then the name of the book.
Social Justice.
Yeah.
Political theorist is a British political theorist. So probably white.
Probably white.
Yeah, there's no pictures of him, but probably white.
Yeah. Who knows?
So he basically argued that there can be no single measure of justice. And this puts him in direct opposition of other people who argue that there are some unifying theories of understanding justice. So basically, the world of social justice is a complicated nuance. There's so many beliefs. There's so many people who have different beliefs. There's so many schools of thought. So it's so cute when white people try to push against social justice, saying that it's just negative vibes. when what they're really dismissing is like hundreds of years of theories and research and perspectives and people's lived experiences.
Yeah.
So let's just be aware that like first off, Tace and Lindsey know about like 0.00001% of what social justice looks like. Two, there's a lot of information out there. Social justice is its own beautiful set of values and systems and theories and principles, and we're not going to be able to cover that in this tiny little podcast. What we are going to do though is one, encourage you to do your research. Like go check out values and principles of social justice. Go learn more about the origins of social justice.
When is this coming out?
Next week.
Ooh, I don't know if the
4th. This comes out on the 4th.
I'm not sure when Desiree Attaway's cart closes, but
she has a course, a beautiful course, available out now. I believe it's called Diversity
is an Asset.
As an asset. Yeah, I'll add that to the show notes as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I know. I just have been seeing it, so I know it's like going on. So that's something to check out.
There's just a lot. There's a lot. And that's probably where you're at, actually, to be fully honest. You're probably listening into this being like, oh my God, there's so much. And so we found that this acculturation model can really help to start to think about how to navigate releasing, the culture of white supremacy, the lens that we've been operating under, and moving into a lens of dismantling our internalized, so that we can then start to be better humans externally.
So basically, like what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like go through the framework and the model and like our own notes on it. And like, instead of us using like ethical training or ethical code or ethical thinking, we're basically going to substitute the ethical word for cultural.
Yes.
And so it pertains more to what we're talking about, because like the way we learned the model was for,
ethical.
We learned it in law and ethics class for, psychotherapy.
So I want you to explain what read your note on the definition of acculturation.
The definition of acculturation, and I'm again subbing out cultural for ethical, is a set of internal psychological outcomes, including a clear sense of personal and cultural identity, good mental health, and the achievement of a personal satisfaction in the new cultural context.
Oof.
So remembering also that it's acculturation is a continuous process for the individual, and they will continue to develop and move through several types of adaptation.
So acculturation really is like, okay, when you're moving into a new country, how do you assimilate? How do you integrate? How do you adapt to this new culture? Is really what acculturation is talking about. It's like little Thais moved to the United States. How did I adapt? And what strategies did I use to adapt? But there's a lot of similarities between moving into a new culture, like the United States, and moving into a new culture
of thinking
and
living and being, right?
Yeah. And the reason why I wish that I had this model when I first started is because I really lost myself in the social justice world. I really let go of all of my old identity. And Lindsey, this is actually something that I have had a lot of therapy around. Because I moved so often when I was little. I moved, I was born in Brazil, and then I moved to Japan, and then back to Brazil, and then back to Japan, back to Brazil, and then to the United States. One of my ways that I've learned how to adapt at such an early age was the minute I sensed that this is a new world was to completely let go of the old one. Like plunging full, like bomb dive into the pool, fully let go of anything, because nothing I learned in the past is going to help me now. It's time for me to fully commit. So a lot of my quote unquote intelligence and the way that I can learn so quickly, and the way that I learned social justice and spoke the language of social justice so quickly, comes actually from a wounded space of being terrified of being left behind, terrified of being abandoned, terrified that if I don't adapt quickly, I'm going to lose myself. The irony is, I lose myself. And that's why I think this model is so helpful for many of you. You may be feeling the same way, of you're feeling like a fish out of water, and you need to quickly as possible, dive into this new culture because there's people-pleasing tendencies and you want to do good. You want to be a good white woman. And what this model invites us is just a little bit more nuance.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, how, like, inevitably the greater kind of social conversation always tends to eventually get to where we all need to go, right?
Yeah.
And there has been so much talk about cultural appropriation.
Yes.
And this is that wound.
Yes.
That's the wound for white people, right? Is that we have, gone so far from, the parts of our culture that we should still be tending to and honoring, and we've disregarded them. And so we're so disconnected from anything of meaningful, foundation that we take from other cultures to try to fill that void.
Yes.
And that's a really big, important thing to identify.
Yeah. So where do we want to go next? Do we want to talk about the 3 reasons why this conversation is not so simple?
Yeah. So, this is just kind of basically...
these are great. We can really adapt them. For example, number 1, the rules embedded in our cultures are sometimes vague and conflicting.
Right.
This is a big one, especially in social justice. You will learn so many vague and conflicting statements.
And it's like, do this. No, do this. No, don't do that. Do this. And then you feel like, oh my God, I literally can't do anything right. What do you want from me?
Yes.
That is the feeling that can come up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that right there is something that by listening to us tell you that, you can be ready and aware of, oh, Thais and Lindsey mentioned that I'm going to feel super conflicted.
Yes.
I'm going to feel like there's
You're
so many
going to get conflicting information. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a thought. That does not mean that social justice community is weak. It does not mean that it's wrong or negative vibes or like you're entitled to then not pay attention. Mm-hmm. It just means that no one person speaks for all people. It means that there is nuance, there is complexity, and we have to start learning how to hold those things. Mm-hmm. Because everyone is going to have an opinion. Everyone has a belief. Everybody. You, at the end of the day, are going to have to sit with some vagueness and some conflicting information. And that's why this model is so important. And we're going to talk about why that. This is all going to come together. Do not worry.
Yes, don't worry. And it's another reason also why you have to continue to, work on your ability to stretch yourself emotionally so that you can start to hold this ambivalence and ambiguity that is going to continue to happen. Yeah. So number 2.
This is really good. So learning about social justice by watching other people is incomplete.
Right. This is when we were talking a little bit before we started recording, we were like, oh my gosh, this is why we get so upset, all of us as a collective, when we see these big leaders, like these big white women, spiritual women in like
the
big
industry.
Leadership foundations. We get so upset when they blatantly fuck up and then they blatantly don't care and then they blatantly disregard and they keep it moving. Because it crushes the rest of us that are looking for models, looking for examples, looking to like leaders to show us the way, right? Yeah. And so that we have to just remember, looking at leaders to model behavior is only part of learning.
The other part is really fun. It's doing it, talking about it. Getting in the trenches. There's only so much watching that you can do. And watching becomes this sick voyeurism. And it becomes kind of...
it keeps you stuck.
And safe. But like in a real... It keeps you upholding white supremacy. Let's name it what we're naming it. Like,
that's for sure.
It keeps you in a place where you're not actually internalizing the information. You're mentalizing the information.
And I think it's important, too, that, like, you really have to have a grounded sense of self when you're starting to navigate when it's appropriate for you to take these leaps into the next steps, into action, into doing. Because, and I know we've mentioned this before, and I've alluded to this because I really like the way she says it. Glennon Doyle says, when you first start waking up, you have to like be careful because just like an addict or an alcoholic, you can't trust yourself.
Yeah.
You can't trust yourself around like booze, you know? So like you can't really trust yourself.
She said booze, not boobs, because I heard boobs, but she definitely said booze.
Yeah. You can't trust yourself like maybe to have these open conversations because you are very violent.
Yeah.
And you have to be mindful and careful of that you can't just be bleh.
So just
all
as like
over
the
place.
first one with the vague and conflicting, what we're saying is two different things. One, it's important to be in a role of watching, listening, observing, knowing before you just leap in and lead. First off, we as white people do not need to lead. We don't need to lead anything. There are plenty of people of color, particularly Black and Indigenous women of color, who are leading the way. We have to follow.
We need to learn how to follow.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
But at the same time, like, notice when you're watching as an excuse to not actually start doing the work because you're so terrified of being called out, of being wrong, of being bad.
Which is where, like, a friend that you're kind of navigating this through, having kind of like this a buddy system to do this with, or like a group that's holding you accountable, can help you check yourself from the outside, you know?
So this is a good one.
Number 3.
It says ethics. This is what it says. It says ethics, but we're going to replace it in a minute. Ethics is the story of right and wrong, but it often is taught as a study of wrong. So I see this a lot in the social justice conversation where it's a lot of wrong. This is wrong. Right. This is wrong. This is wrong. Don't do this. Wrong. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. But not a lot of what is right. What can we do? What's next? And
it's hard.
It
makes it more complex.
Yeah.
It makes it more difficult on learners, right?
But there are people who are teaching what is right. There are people who are talking about what is right and modeling what is right. And like, it's our responsibility to go look for those people.
Right, exactly. And I think that is one of the most important things to do. And I think that ultimately, I think almost every single one of the people we have resourced, right? We have like provided links for, we talk about, they really, I mean, they do so much amazing work around, you know, calling out what is wrong and then saying, this is what you should have done.
Yeah.
So that you have a very clear understanding and you're not like, okay, this is wrong, but why? Oh, shit. Yeah. Wait, hold on. I would have said that. Fuck. Why is it wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't understand. Wait, I don't see what's wrong with that.
Yeah.
Because remember, as white people, we are literally breaking down the invisible. Yeah. We can't see it. We can't see it because we haven't been indoctrinated to it, and we have literally learned it to be invisible. Yeah. It's part of the air we breathe, you know? So remembering all of this.
Can I just go on like a Gemini tangent for a minute?
Oh, Lord.
I just had a thought, and I don't want to lose it because I think it's like really potent, but it's like completely irrelevant. Okay. So I just want...
We do this all the time.
I know. I just, I want all of us to remember that, like, when we're following people of color on social media, we often get very tantalized by their struggles and by their challenges. And, like, we look to them to teach us about racial inequality or whatever the marginalized identity is. Like, you know, we follow fat women because we, you know, want them to teach us about what it looks like to move through life in a fat body. You know, and we look to trans women to like, you know, so we're like looking to these people, and like, it's so beautiful that they were willing to be visible and they were willing to be, but let's also remember that like they're allowed to be in their joy. Yeah. And we are invited to celebrate them in their joy.
Absolutely.
Because I think oftentimes like we get so caught up in having it to look like a struggle. And like we like, you know, send money in Patreon and PayPal in the struggle. But can we send money in Patreon and PayPal in their joy?
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think that's a really good thing to point out, because at the end of the day, like, this is all about being human.
Yeah.
And experiencing all of our humanness.
I think this is, for me personally, it's very easy for me to share my struggles virtually online.
Oh, it's probably easier for most of us to share our struggles versus our celebrations and our joy.
Because when I celebrate my joy, I'm like, oh my God, I'm narcissistic.
I'm too much. I'm taking up too much space.
Why do
people are going to think like this, that, and the other.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how that works.
Oh, yeah.
But like this, I've just been sitting with this lately. Like, can we be celebrating each other in our joys, and our challenges and our sorrows? Anyway.
Yeah, all of it. I don't think that was a tangent. I think it was very relevant.
Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about Barry's motto of acculturation.
Oh, yeah.
So it provides a framework for education that may allow one to more effectively understand the transition from one culture to another. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
one value system to another, one framework to another.
Yeah.
And okay, so we basically thinking of it in two separate dimensions. So the first dimension is cultural maintenance, and it's where we identify with our culture of origin.
Which in this case would be what? Would it be?
Well, I think this is a very interesting piece of the puzzle for white people. So much of us don't even know our culture of origin.
But I would even say,
and I can talk about that specifically.
Yeah, but I would say it's even not so much about culture of origin. Like, I'm Brazilian, so my culture of origin is Brazil. But more like culture of origin maybe being our identification as white people. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, you know, it's so easy for us to want to, like, once we start learning about social justice, to want to lose our whiteness.
Yeah.
Right? We get ashamed of being white, and we, like, want to, like, be non-white.
Yeah.
But the best way to navigate all this is eventually get to the place where it's not like you're quote unquote proud of being white, but you're not in shame of what you can't control, which is the color of your skin. So you feel settled in your whiteness while also knowing the power dynamic that comes from your whiteness.
Yeah, no, I see that. Absolutely.
So I would say the culture of origin would be whiteness.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then the second dimension is
contact and participation with the identification of the adopted culture, adopted value system.
So I would say that the adopted culture here is social justice.
Yes.
So we're moving from whiteness to social justice.
Yeah. So we want to move from a white supremacist culture.
Yeah.
To
a social justice oriented culture.
Absolutely.
I actually want to pause real quick. I found some good definitions of like what social justice is, and I just think that because we're throwing around that word a lot, that maybe it may be helpful to just look at some definitions.
Okay, where's this coming from?
So there's this a website called socialjusticesolutions.org. Again, I can't vouch for the website, but I will put the link in the show notes, and it just shares some of the main, the big places that define social justice.
From like Webster Dictionary.
Yes. Okay. So like dictionary.com defines social justice as the distribution of advantages and disadvantages within a society. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as a state or doctrine of egalitarianism, which is defined as a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic affairs. Business Dictionary defines social justice as the fair and proper administration of laws conforming to the natural law that all persons, irrespective of ethnic origin, gender, possessions, race, religion, etc., are to be treated equally and without prejudice. National Association of Social Workers defines social justice as the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. Wikipedia says that justice exercised within a society, particularly as it is exercised by and among various social classes of that society. A socially just society is defined by its advocates to practitioners as being based on the principles of equality and solidarity, recognizing the dignity of every human being. So like the words dignity, equality, laws, civil rights, solidarity, these are all kind of infused in this idea of social justice. I mean, basically, we're just talking about human rights. We're talking about political, social, and economic equality. We're talking about equal distribution of resources, removing inequality. There was another website that I really liked that defined some of their values that I think is important that we look at. Let me just pull it up real quick. So here are some of their 10 key values that Lindsey and I agree are beautiful values that we can be holding as we step into social justice. This idea of grassroots democracy. So all human beings must be allowed to have a say in decisions that affect their lives. No one should be subject to the will of another. Equal opportunity. As a matter of right, all persons must have the opportunity to benefit equally from the resources afforded us by society and the environment. Ecological wisdom. Human societies must function with the understanding that we are part of nature, not separate from nature. We must maintain an ecological balance and live within the ecological and resource limits of our communities and our planet. I love that one so much. Nonviolence. It is essential that we develop effective alternatives to society's current patterns of violence. Decentralization. Centralization of wealth and power contributes to social and economic injustice, environmental destruction, and militarization. We seek a restructuring of social, political, and economic institutions away from a system controlled by and mostly benefiting the powerful few to a democratic, less bureaucratic system. 6, we have community-based economics. We support redesigning our work structures to encourage employee ownership and workplace democracy. Feminism and gender equity. We have inherited a social system based on male domination of politics and economics. We call for the replacement of the cultural ethics of domination and control with cooperative ways of interacting that respect differences of opinion and gender. Human values such as gender equity, interpersonal responsibility, and honesty must be developed with moral conscience. Respect for diversity. We believe it is important to value cultural, ethnic, racial, sexual, religious, and spiritual diversity and to promote the development of respectful relationships across the human spectrum. 9, personal and global responsibility. We encourage individuals to act to improve their personal well-being and at the same time to enhance ecological balance and social harmony. And 10, future focus and sustainability. Our actions and policies should be motivated by long-term goals. I think that is just such a beautiful breakdown of what, for me, what I believe social justice to be really about. And you all, the best part of all this, get to decide what your values are and like what you want it to look like. Okay, so let's go from the bottom up.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah, I think it's like...
Let's talk from the least to the most.
Yeah, so basically this framework will go through kind of like the least like ideal and the most problematic strategy to the most effective, the most ideal.
Yeah.
So we'll start at the bottom with marginalization. So marginalization is the most problematic strategy.
For adapting to a new culture.
Yes. You do not have a well-developed personal moral sense, nor an internalized sense of the culture, and this individual can also be disturbed or impaired, like Donald Trump.
So basically, we talked about the 2 dimensions, right? So marginalization is a low identification to culture of origin and low identification with adopted culture. So basically, they have low moral ethic codes for themselves, and they don't want to adapt to the adopted culture either. So, yeah, you're highlighting the word alienation.
Yeah, because this is basically
You feel alienated from...
I mean, if we look at our presidency and look what he's doing, what is he doing? He's alienating so many, like, people, humans, even citizens of the United States. Forget about the,
So the marginalization is basically saying that, like, it's better for you to have strong values, even if those values are very, very different than the adopted culture, than to have no real values.
Yeah, because then you have, like, no sense of morality whatsoever.
And you have no sense of self. I mean, this could also be tied to disorganized attachment.
100%.
So in attachment theory, disorganized attachment is, basically like you're in a double bind where you want something, but you're afraid to go after it because you feel like you're going to be punished. So like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
So the sense of self is almost like deteriorated by this constant, like, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? What should I do?
Yeah. So I would say for us in this conversation, marginalization is really low self identification, low self understanding. You don't really know who you are. You're very lost, and there's no judgment if that's where you are. But if without doing the inner work of cultivating some personal identification, it's very easy for you to become psychopathic.
I'm just going to call it out here, and I'm going to assume that not many people listening to this podcast is going to fall into this category.
Yeah.
However,
the next
one is called separation. And that is, it's still less ideal.
I mean, I think that's most people waking up to their whiteness. I think
so. Yeah. And it's problematic. It's just
because you're white.
It's just not as problematic as like the other marginalization. So this is when you have a high identification with the maintenance of your own culture of origin, which we have identified for this context is white supremacy.
Yeah.
And you have low contact and participation with the adopted culture of social justice.
Yeah. So this would be like Thais moving to the United States and refusing to learn English. Mm-hmm. Like, period. Like, refusing to get it. And that was me for a few months. I refused to learn English. I did not want to do it. So I held high maintenance to my culture of origin. I held high connection to being Brazilian, to eating Brazilian food, like watching Brazilian TV. Like, I refused to adapt, I should say. And this is most white people.
So this is a perfect example of separation. Hashtag not all men. Hashtag all lives matter.
Ooh,
hashtag
drop
not
it,
this white woman.
Drop
hashtag
it, sister.
Not me. Like,
yes,
perfect freaking
because you're so
example.
identified as being this good white person that like this idea of being called problematic, being called wrong is
it's just like so you can't even fathom that would be like part of you. You can't even own that. It's just too much.
Too much.
So that, I think,
is where most of us are.
Where most people are.
Yes. And because you get the sense that like, especially now, you're getting more and more of a sense that like being white is problematic. So you get a sense of social justice, but like, they're too extremist. If they were only nicer. If they weren't so angry,
yes,
then
that's the biggest
then maybe
thing.
I would be interested.
Maybe if you said it differently, we could hear it.
Lindsey, you have spinach in your teeth.
Oh,
I see it so clearly right
Where?
now. Oh, I can't stop seeing it now. It's like so there.
Where?
I can't.
Which side? Tell me.
It's right there.
Okay. Geez, it took you this long.
I didn't know. I don't look at your teeth.
When I'm talking?
I look at your eyes, your beautiful, gorgeous green eyes.
Green eyes like green of spinach?
I mean...
Did I get it?
I mean, it's really in there now.
I feel it.
I think you're getting close. There it is.
Oh,
Woo!
Lord. I still feel it.
Oh, it's probably in the other side, but it's not visible.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Anyways. Okay,
I'm sorry. Once I see it, I can't not see it.
I appreciate it.
And then I would just accidentally be saying spinach the entire... the entire podcast.
No, it's good because like
spinach are racist.
I always appreciate people, especially like you're sitting across from somebody. Tell them they have fucking a booger hanging out of their
oh my god,
nose.
right? Because then what if you don't say it right away, and then they're like all day.
Yeah.
But then they get home and they look in the mirror and they're like, God damn it! Why didn't that person tell me this entire time? And then of course that person always says, "Well, I didn't notice." But it's like, fuck you.
No,
you have to notice.
There's a big booger hanging out of my nose. Of course you noticed.
Okay, well you're welcome.
Okay. All right, so. Now we are moving in to the second phase, okay? Or the second
assimilation
stage.
Is what I talked about earlier. This is when I lost myself completely to the new culture.
This is, I think, super important because this is a less ideal stage, obviously, and it's
mildly problematic.
Mildly problematic in a certain sense, aka in our sense, it's problematic as fuck. But what the kind of biggest red flag here is because when you assimilate, this can lead you to a false sense
of competence. Okay, so let's talk about it. So assimilation is when you have high contact
and
with
participation
with the new culture.
So like, you are all in social justice. You are a social justice warrior.
You're a Thais. at the beginning. And you completely let go of your old culture. So you're like, fuck everything that I was beforehand. Like, everything I was beforehand was wrong and bad. And like, I don't know who I am.
You're like disregarding it. You're like,
You're totally
like, fuck white people.
Yes. And you're like totally in anger mode, and you can't possibly forgive yourself for being so stupid beforehand, and you're just completely attached to this new identity of yourself as a social justice warrior, good intersectional feminist. You change all your handles to intersectional feminist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to tell now everybody, like,
That, like,
you completely lose yourself. And this
Absolutely.
is exactly what I did. Again, because it was coming from a wounded place. Now, on the outside, this looks in some ways great because I'm no longer willing to uphold white supremacy.
Right.
So I'm willing to die, literally, ego death. I'm willing to let go of everything I knew. The entire way that I identified myself, I'm willing to let go of all of that. Stop picking at your teeth.
I can't help it. I feel the spinach. I feel it.
I'm willing to let go of all of that because I'm terrified to be called bad and wrong. So assimilation, while on the outside appears ideal, what it's really happening is that it's performative and it's shallow because you're not actually integrating, you're extricating.
Yes.
Is that a word?
I think it can be. I think it can be for this scenario.
We're extricating.
I actually have to, and you have to be careful. You have to watch because you can slip in and out of these phases. Because remember what we said, this is an ongoing process, right?
Yep.
So I find that sometimes I slip back into assimilation in very particular instances.
Oh.
I will be out to have a meal.
Yeah.
With a friend.
Yeah.
Who happens to be a woman of color. And we'll start talking about, the shit show of life as we always do.
Yeah.
And I'll catch myself being like, oh, and let me guess, he was a white fucking man. And rolling my eyes, right?
Yeah.
Fuck white people.
But I like doing that, Lindsey. What are you talking about?
Now, though, but we have to be careful there. Because that's us completely trying to disregard and like stomp out part of who we are.
Yes.
Like, I'm fucking white.
Yeah.
Like, I literally, there's
so you
nothing
can say
I can
white
do.
man though because we're not man.
Well, I guess so. Yes. But it's like, but when I say fuck white people, that's not okay. That's a part of me that's trying to prove I'm a good white person.
Exactly. You're trying to say what you're really saying is
not this white person.
Not me. Yes.
So that and
it's subtle.
It's so subtle. And I catch myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, note to self, you're still doing this. You still have to be mindful. Like, this is what's happening.
Shaky foundation. You can't lose yourself into something else and expect full integration. If you lost your identity for a boyfriend or a partner, eventually that partner is going to let you down or it's going to break up. And then you're going to have this whole sense of who am I? Well, this is what happens when you're in assimilation mode and then you get called out.
Yeah.
And then you go into this whole panic of oh my God, but why didn't black people come support me? I'm a good social justice warrior.
Right.
Why aren't people coming to my defense?
My gosh. I mean, we can use, didn't that wild woman, that wild feminist woman.
25 Park?
Yes. I mean, this is her flipping out. And
so
then
if your
being
identity...
I foster black children.
Yeah, that was the worst.
I mean, that's terrible. That's part of this, assimilation.
I talk about this constantly because I teach a course, Worthy Women Rise, and we talk a lot about belonging and finding ways to belong. If your identification as a form of belonging is not grounded in all of who you are, any external threat is going to cause a huge cognitive dissonance and you're just going to be devastated.
Yeah.
Because it's all still an ego identification to make yourself look good. It's still displacing the discomfort of sitting with the shame of being white.
So good.
So while, again, assimilation may appear to be such a good thing, because in many ways it can be, we're not saying don't do it. We're saying it's kind of normal to do it. We want to be dismantling white supremacy. We want to be doing the work. We just know, Lindsey and I know, because we've been there, that this is not long. It's not sustainable. You can't sustain this because one negative comment, like you're not getting enough likes, so you're getting enough whatever.
Completely derail you.
It completely derails you and spirals you into your worthiness wound, and it's the whole thing. So, this for me, in my experience, outside of white supremacy, is like completely losing my Portuguese, right? It's like completely like, now I'm going to learn English and I'm going to completely fuck Portuguese because I now live in America. So like, I'm going to completely adapt to this culture. But then like, look at the complexity of my humanness that I miss out on. I miss out on a whole world of things.
Absolutely.
And who you are before you wake up to your white privilege is not an inherently bad person. You just had a lens that gave you privileges that you didn't know about. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Yeah.
You may be doing fucking awful bad things.
Right.
Out of ignorance and out of, your unconscious knowing.
Which is unacceptable.
Unacceptable. And that's got to be correct. And you've got to take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And, it's like punishing yourself for something you can't control is not the answer.
Absolutely.
And so, saying fuck white people displaces the harm. It basically says, like, I can't sit with your pain and your lived experience. So I'm going to like try to like put a shield up of, fuck white people.
So it's important.
As opposed to being like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yep. And just being able to sit with it.
And so next part 5, we're going to talk about apologizing.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
So good. We're going to talk about how to properly apologize when you fucked up because of your whiteness. So stay tuned for that.
But first, we have to talk about
the
most effective strategy of the acculturation model.
The way that we can adapt to both the culture of origin and the adopted culture
is called integration.
I think I gave a few clues of that because I kept using that word.
Well, and we use it often, right? We both use it all the time.
We want to be integrating the old and the new. We want to be bringing it all in. We want to be holding our complexities. We want to be honoring our humanity while also knowing that we can do better.
So this is literally the definition from our notes. It's the retention of important aspects of one's heritage, but also adoption from new cultural offerings.
I love that. Cultural offerings.
So here's the thing, though. Because we've identified that in this context, we're using the culture of origin as white supremacy, there is no important aspect to retain of white supremacy. So just want to make that very clear.
For that nuance there.
We want to make that very clear. So what's going to happen is now we're going to pivot when we talk about integration, and we're going to talk about retaining important aspects of one's own heritage. Now, your heritage is not white supremacy.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
You have to look back. You have to do your own,
ancestral
work.
healing.
Yeah. To find those beautiful healing aspects of your culture of origin.
Is this a good time to say that I'm like 99% colonizer?
Oh my gosh. So I know we've talked about my DNA results on the podcast before.
So I'm going to pull up my computer.
That fact that I'm like whiter than white.
So like I did my little DNA test. And I've been actually reaching out.
What did you do through it?
23andMe.
Okay, me too. We can share.
Can we?
We can share and we can see if any of our stuff links.
Wow.
It's so fun.
So I didn't even know there was an app for that.
What?
Wow.
Oh, I've got to let you.
I am slow to the game.
No, wait, you're on Ancestry.
Yeah, it's 23andMe.
Did they combine or something?
Yeah.
Oh.
They bought each other out.
Oh.
Yeah.
News to me. Okay, well, here we go.
So I also reached out to my mom and to confirm some of these things, and like some of what we have seen here, she can confirm.
Oh, you were all over there.
Yeah. So I am 31% Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Lithuania. And in fact, I know for sure I'm Lithuanian. So like my grandmother is Lithuanian. So like that's 100%.
I've had, never mind.
19% Europe West, and that includes Belgium, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein. 18% Iberian Peninsula, that's Portugal and Spain. So it's definitely Portugal. My mom's dad is from Portugal, so that's definitely there. I got 6% Ireland, Scotland, Wales.
People.
So like we got some relations there.
Maybe we're like
distant
cousins.
And then I have 5% Europe South, that's like Greece, Italy, etc. And 3% Native Americano, Native Americans specifically to South America, obviously, because I don't have any connection to North America. So it's so funny because someone on my Facebook commented, saying, "Oh, I wish I had 3% Native American," and I'm like, well, considering that like the majority of my other past is like 100% colonized. I'm pretty sure that poor Native American didn't have much of a choice about being in my bloodline. So, and then I have like low confidence regions, which come from Africa. Like I have like 4% Mali, which is in Africa, Senegal, which is Africa, Africa North, 2% Caucasus, 2% Great Britain, 1% European Jew, less than 1% Asia Central, less than 1% Middle East, and less than 1% Nigeria. So really interesting stuff there.
I mean,
like Lindsey is like pretty much like 99% white. Look at that. 99.9% European.
Yep.
Like there's no doubt that Lindsey
like
is
36% British Irish. 14% French German.
So here's some interesting fun facts.
I don't get to go through all mine. You got to go through all yours.
I'm sorry. Oh my God. Wow.
4.4% Scandinavian.
Wow, why is yours so much more exact? Like 4.4%.
I know. Eastern European, 3.8%. 2% Italian. 0.2% Iberian. Didn't you have some
Iberian Peninsula.
Yeah.
Oh, look at us. We're like literally cousins.
I mean,
we're like literally cousins. This is such a white people thing, by the way.
I know. I have, 0.1.
West African. So like
0.1%.
That West African individual did not have much of a choice in not say either.
Nope. Which is like really like the truth of that is like hits you in your gut.
Oh, it really does. It really does. Because you don't think about it that way until you have to think about it that way.
Exactly.
I mean,
which
again,
I think we should all think about it that way.
We don't want to I have no idea.
No.
But
I mean,
we can make some great estimates based on...
We can romanticize this all we want.
Sure.
And we can say, my so-and-so fell in love with so-and-so and
like
they ran off.
The truth of the matter
is like...
So here's some
But I think that's important to let that discomfort hit you in your gut.
And I highly recommend following Lisa Renee Hall. I interviewed her for the podcast, and she talks a lot about how she has both oppressor and oppressed bloodlines in her and how she navigates that. I highly recommend following her. Yeah. But it's interesting because I did a lot of research into slavery, and the root of slavery lies from the Iberian Peninsula, lies in Spain and Portugal, and not a lot of research has been done on this, which is insane because, of a genocide of like how many millions and millions and millions of people have been so understudied, whereas the genocide of the Nazi is like there are millions of books by it. And talk about white supremacy, the fact that most people don't even know that the origins of slavery really comes from the Iberian Peninsula, and no one really understands that it was actually brown people who first enslaved black people. And so when we talk about white supremacy now, we basically label it all as white people because now it's evolved to all white people. Right. But it was actually a slow transition to whiteness. It did not inherently start whiteness. It was really like the European nations versus African nations. And in Africa, it originally started with African kings and African lords coming together with the Spaniards and the Portuguese and like cutting deals. So like they originally sold their own people at the very, very, very beginning, but then the desire for more bodies quickly overtook that deal. And then they like really went hard at it, and they were like, well, fuck you, we're just going to kill you, and we're just going to take all your people. And so much of the tribal feudings that are happening in Africa right now is because of the European invasion and colonization of Africa. So there's just a lot of history here, people. It's like, we were not taught this. How many books did we have to read in high school? Like, how many books? Like, I'd say, like, what, 50? Like, I'm sure 99% were by white men.
Oh.
And, like, the histories that we learn about how, you know, indigenous peoples just casually left their land.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just...
they just, like, gave it to us.
So...
On Thanksgiving.
We really... In order for us to really understand our adopted culture, understand social justice, we have to learn the right history, not the whitewashed history. And then when we're talking about like understanding our culture of origin too, it's not just ancestry, but really understanding who you are as a person. This is a great place for you to create your own values list.
I do think, though, ancestry can be really vital, though.
Oh, absolutely. I teach it. This is essential. We must know where we're from. We must understand the land that we come from and the origins of that, so that we don't culturally appropriate, so that we don't have this void where we're taking the spiritual truths of other people.
That's the biggest thing. And I think especially
I just don't want to end it there.
No. Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like our community, especially with like the spiritual teachings, and like we are taking so much from so many other.
Can we just stop at the dream catchers?
Yeah.
Can we please just stop with the fucking dream catchers? Unless you're buying a dream catcher, like specifically from indigenous communities, you know, like, can we, please, for the love of all things holy.
Just like don't go and buy one on Etsy from some like white girl that like
I know it's tempting. I know it's beautiful. Of course it's beautiful. It comes from such a deep, rich lineage. Then go learn about the lineage, right? Like if I have 3% native blood or whatever that means, like to hell, I'm not going to be like using that as some sort of like, oh, now that means I get to
out of jail free card or something.
Right. It's actually my invitation to be like, well, if this is true, because we don't know, because 3%, what is that? You know, then like I have a whole responsibility to like understand exactly what tribe and what community and what that looks like and the history of that community and like, you know, where it is now and like how I can be its greatest advocate and support and ally.
Absolutely.
So how are you feeling about the acculturation model?
Good. I think it's really good to point out that one of the biggest goals of the acculturation model is the appreciation of the complexity and the inherent ambiguity of the process.
Mic drop. That's really potent.
So good.
So like we want to get to a place where we can talk about social justice and it doesn't shake us to our foundation if someone questions us. We can talk about it, we can be it, we can live it. And then if someone questions us, we're so rooted in who we are. We're so rooted in our value system that it's hard to shake us from our core.
Unless your foundation is white supremacy.
Wait,
then shake the fuck out of that shit.
Right. Yes. Agreed. Of course. Right. But like that's how we can bring both of these cultures together. Both your identity as a white person that you're not going to fucking change. Please don't become like Rachel Dizal or whatever her name is, who like calls herself transracial.
You know,
let's not do that. Right. So how can we embrace all of who we are? All of who we are. That means the color of our skin, how much our body weighs, our hair color, you know, like, how can we embrace these imperfections and our perfections? How can we just be with all of our humanity as well as fully understand what those things mean? That if you are abled body, that means you can leverage your privilege as a responsibility for those who do not have an able body. You know, we can talk about accessibility. We can talk about the fact that I have this deep belief that all movie theaters should have subtitles. I don't understand why movie theaters do not have subtitles. Why don't movie theaters have subtitles?
Yeah, why don't they?
Anytime I talk about this with someone who's like outside of the social justice, they're like, oh, because then it distracts me. I'm like, then Watch the movie at home.
The screen is huge. How is it a distraction?
Right. Whereas there are so many people who cannot go to the movies because they can't follow the movie because they have, an ability to hear well, or because they're like me who have a hard time with the English language. There's so many reasons why I think that we need to have subtitles in movie theaters. But anyway, so there's so many ways that we can be understanding our privilege without it annihilating our humanity.
And just remember, don't care take, care give.
Don't care take, care give. I love that so much.
I think it's so funny. I literally am just being very mindful of what's happening in my closet right now. And I think it's funny. I'm reflecting back on all the times we've sat here and recorded podcasts and all the different movements that happen while we record. Right now, you started out a whole person away from me, and you are literally now on top of me. I am, look at me, I am in this corner. I am up against the corner. But there's been times where we'll be moving and shifting because it's a tight space, you know? And I remember once I had my leg on top of yours because I was I don't have anywhere else to put it.
Well, let me just say that anyone who shares a bed with me
knows
that they will get 1/5 of the bed.
What?
And I get, because I'm a snuggler.
Oh,
so I snuggle.
Give me my space.
I'm a snuggler.
It's a sleepy time.
I'm a little snuggle bunny.
No, it's sleepy time.
No, but it's snuggly bunny.
No.
Time. Yeah.
No.
So then I
No.
I just keep pushing against.
Oh, that's terrible. What an invasion of space.
And then they will shift, and then I kind of shift with them. And then,
they're at the poor them. They're in unconscious dream state.
Yep. So pretty soon.
What a violation.
So pretty soon they're at the very, very, very edge of the bed, and I'm all on top of that person.
You are
snuggle bunny.
Never sleeping over.
Snuggle bunny. Well, usually it happens for me with people of the opposite sex.
Who knows? I don't want to take that chance. My unconscious will turn over and whap you.
Knowing my idolization of Lindsey Rae.
Oh my God,
I'm gonna
I'm in a corner. Help! Send help! Send help!
I'm pressing my body against her. She says that she hates it, but she really loves it.
Help!
She loves this.
Help! Where's my $1 from Patreon every month?
This is when we end it.
I'm not letting that go.
This is when we end this shit.
I'm not letting that go.
All right. Well, if any of you have questions about any of this, show notes, there's tons of stuff there. Go read, Google. Please do not rely on the unpaid emotional labor of people of color to educate your white ass on racism. Or actually, I should extend that. Do not ask anyone with a marginalized identity to support you in your privilege. Go either pay them or go find another source of information.
And there's so much.
There's so much.
You all, there's so much out there. There's, left, right, and center. And I feel you can find an anti-racist education, seminar or course or weekend.
And if you're listening to this part first, I highly recommend going to the beginning.
You should start
at part one. But we are going to keep going at this. We have a lot to share, and this is a continual process, as we learned in the acculturation model.
Continual process. We've all got years and years of unpacking a lot.
Yes. And if you're enjoying this conversation like Lindsey hinted at, please consider supporting the podcast on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support this epic podcast with my poor editing skills. Maybe if I had more Patreons, then my editing skills would be better. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you all for listening, for being with us on Reclaim. We so appreciate you. And we'll be back soon for part 5.
Bye.